What's going on, guys? It's Jesus here again to bring you another League of Legends video. Today is episode number 2 of Generic Talk Show about the pros. Today we're going to be discussing the LCS power rankings, so hopefully you like the video. Let's go and get into it. Alright guys, so like I said, today's episode is going to be LCS power rankings. MSI is now finished. We can conclude that EU is obviously better than NA at this point. No, I'm just kidding. Certainly G2 came out, they performed well, and they beat TL like I was expecting to happen. It was a little bit more severe than I expected to happen. Wasn't expecting a world record to be set, but that's neither here nor there. Like I said, LCS power rankings. Is Team Liquid still going to be at the top? Personally, yeah, probably. I'm gonna say so. I'm gonna put TL in my number 1 on the power rankings. Okay, and I think they deserve it, right after their performance at MSI, which was reminiscent of CLG in 2015, maybe even more so in the sense where Team Liquid was actually able to beat the previous year's world champion. So that's pretty awesome right there. And so you got to give them a little bit of credit, right? I mean, sure, they didn't do well in the final itself against G2. I'll give you that one, but they did well. They outperformed our expectations, and I think it's fair to give them the top seed, at least expected so, in the power rankings. Their team's going to remain the same, right? They're not changing out any players. These are top caliber players at pretty much every position. So what are you going to do? I mean, there's a chance for an upset, obviously, but I'm not expecting it. I expect TL to assuredly be number 1, at least going into the playoffs. And we're on to number 2 right here. And I'm sure everybody kind of agrees on the top 3, and where you put them might differ slightly. For me personally, number 2 is going to be Cloud9, right? Cloud9, obviously a really strong team. I personally like their style. I think they're very versatile, right? They have a power top laner for sure in Licorice. Niski ended up being a pretty decent replacement for Jensen. I don't think you're going to find that he's better than Jensen, right? I mean, and I don't know if anybody expected him to be. It's can he fill the role that Jensen filled in Cloud9? And I think for the most part he's done that relatively well. To the best that you could expect anybody to really do, fill in some type of shoes like that. It's like a Aaron Rodgers filling in for Brett Favre, right? It's one of those types of situations. It worked out for him, and they're still a strong team. Sure, there's the meme of sneaky in lane, but he's a pretty good team fighter. He plays a pretty good support style AD carry as well. Zazel's he's turned out to be a really good replacement for Smoothie, who I was like, no way. Smoothie was, like, in my opinion, the best support in North America when he was on Cloud9, and to have him get put on the bench and replaced with Zazel, it was a shock for me. I wasn't expecting it, and I wasn't expecting Zazel to actually perform as well as he has. And he's turned out to be pretty good. Svenskeren went from straight, inting on TSM half the time to half of the time inting on Cloud9. But no, he's been a pretty good playmaker for him. He's gotten stuff going. Helps out Licorice in the top lane a lot. Secures smites really well. Overall, they're a pretty strong team. They're, like I said, they're versatile. They can adapt really well. They actually can play aggressively, which is something that Team Liquid, I think, has they're not super good at unless Xmethy gets Jarvan. So yeah, I think they're probably one of the better aggressive North American teams, and I think they'll certainly be top 4, but I'm going to put them number 2 in my power rankings. Alright guys, so on to the next one. Number 3. Again, if everybody can kind of agree on a top 3, y'all kind of probably see this one coming. Number 3 is going to be TSM for me. So TSM's bringing in, at least presumably, the same roster that they had in spring. Maybe you could argue that Greg comes in instead of Acadian. Personally, I think that would be a bad decision. Acadian had a pretty good first split with TSM, and I think that he deserves at least another one to show that he's actually worthy, and maybe he turns out to be a pretty good jungler. I remember, I think it was his rookie split back in 2000, was that 16 or 17, when he was on Echo Fox, and I didn't like his attitude very much. He kind of got on my nerves, but he's turned out to be a pretty good jungler for TSM overall, and his attitude's changed. Maybe that's why I like him a little bit more. I don't know. But, so TSM's a strong team. I think they're bringing the same roster. I think it would be smart of them to bring the same roster. Broken Blade turned out to be a pretty good investment overall. Pretty good Turkish top laner. And then Bjergsen, obviously it's Bjergsen, right? I mean, he's going to be solid in the mid lane no matter what. And then Sven and Smoothie. Again, I just talked about how Smoothie, I thought he was the best support in NA when he was on Cloud9. I think he's still a top support in NA for sure. And then you got Sven. Sven's a good player. Okay, Sven is consistent and generally does what he needs to do to win the game. But there have been a couple of times, specifically against Team Liquid in Game 5 of the final, where Sven got caught out. And I mean, obviously there were other things that happened in that game, but at that point in time, that's what changed the momentum of the game, was Sven getting picked off and dying there. So, you can say what you want. I think that, it's still a pretty solid team. They can play topside carries. They're definitely more stable than previous iterations of TSM, where previous iterations of TSM played more like Team Liquid does now, where it's more of a slow, laid-back style. These guys are playing a little bit more aggressive, thanks to Acadian, right? So maybe if they go to Grig, maybe that changes. But this is just knowing what we currently know. I think that they'll be a pretty decent contender, for higher seeds in the playoff. Could potentially take that number 2 spot, or even number 1, leaving the regular season. But I'm, for the purpose of this particular video, I'm giving them rank number 3. Alright guys, now that we've made it through the simple, easy predictions that probably most people are going to say, I'm going to get to the ones that I'm a little less confident on, which is the rest of the LCS, right? The big group that tends to fall behind, these top 3 here. Just because of what my expectations going into Spring Split and the way that they performed in Spring Split, I'm going to give this team the benefit of the doubt, considering that they're possibly keeping basically the same roster, and say that they could do it again. So I'm putting FlyQuest at number 4. Okay, FlyQuest was really super decent last year, especially considering my expectations going in. Like I said, I mean, I was thinking this team would be a flop, that there's no chance that they really even made playoffs. And then not only did they make playoffs, but they did so in a pretty good spot. What was it, number 4? I think they finished. I mean, they did a good enough job to put them up on a pedestal that I would set them up there on a little bit higher pedestal than I think many people would, just because of my low expectations from going into Spring Split. But they're consistent, right? They don't do a lot of dumb things. Pobelter's a decent mid laner. Santorin's turned out to be a pretty good jungler, which was a super shock to me. I thought Santorin was absolute garbage, but he's actually, at least in spring, he did pretty well. So let's say he does it again, right? And then you got Viper in the top lane, who on his rookie split did pretty well. I would expect him to continue doing relatively well as long as these carries continue to stay relevant in top lane. I don't know how I feel about him in a more tank-focused meta, but for right now, I think he'll be okay. So, and then, of course, Wild Turtle, right? Wild Turtle has a veteran. He's a veteran in this league. He's been around. He's won championships domestically, and generally been a pretty consistent player. Sure, he's the guy to flash forward and die and cost his team the game, but he's also the guy that'll flash forward and actually possibly get you that kill that wins you the game. So maybe consistent's not necessarily the best word to describe it, but he's consistently there. He consistently performs the way you expect him to perform, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. I think it's probably more good than bad on most occasions. Now this last part, though, this part is where it starts to get pretty interesting, okay? Because this hasn't been confirmed. I want to go ahead and make sure that that's clear. This hasn't been confirmed by anybody yet, but when I was doing research for this video, looked up and noticed that something that I missed, a piece of information I missed, but FlyQuest picked up Wadid from Rogue. They actually traded their Academy mid laner, Selfie, to Rogue and picked up Wadid as support. So they haven't confirmed as to whether or not which player will actually start for the LCS team, be it Wadid or JJ. I don't know. I think JJ is pretty basic. Like, I don't think he's one of those players like Matt. You know what I mean? Where he's there, and it's like when you can't find somebody else, it's like, hey, JJ is available. Oh, okay, yeah. He won't die 24/7. He's one of those players. And Wadid obviously had a pretty good running on G2 for a little bit. He's been a pretty good support in EU, and I think that he'd be a pretty good support in North America as well. Working with Wild Turtle, I think they'd make a pretty good buy lane. So the question is that going to be enough to continue what they got going on and keep fourth place? I think so, but we'll have to see how the split turns out. But yeah, so FlyQuest at fourth. All right, guys, next on the list, number 5. This is a pretty bold one, I think, anyways. I haven't seen anybody else in their predictions. I don't know what everybody else is thinking yet. I'm trying my best to get this out as soon as possible. But number 5, 100 Thieves. Yeah, I don't know. I think last split, I should say, last split was tough for 100 Thieves, right? It's been tough for them, in my opinion, since they lost Meteos. I mean, let's be honest. Onda was not a super great jungler. I've seen some things where people try to make the argument for Onda, and I could see it. He's not really that guy that'll lose you the game. But how often is he winning it for you? You know what I mean? He's a pretty passive guy from what I've seen. Direct opposite of what Meteos is as a person, right? And Meteos is blunt, forward, and is not afraid to tell you how he thinks the game should be played. Whereas Onda, I think, just sits back and listens a lot. On top of that, Huhi obviously was in hindsight, an awful pickup. So that feels bad for 100 Thieves on that. That being said, I'm not sure how I feel about Saligo, who is, as far as anybody knows, Saligo will be the starting mid laner for 100 Thieves. I'm not sure how I feel about him. We'll give him a full split and see what happens. Personally, I think that 100 Thieves should try and pick up Demonte. But let's get to the real meat of the 100 Thieves story. Is now Onda's gone, or at least maybe moved to Academy. He's off the main LCS team. And 100 Thieves pulled some trickery and got amazing. Okay? So for those of you who don't know, when I saw this, I was like, oh, that's a good upgrade for 100 Thieves. Like, I've been waiting for them to replace Onda since they got rid of Meteos, and I'm glad to actually see them bring Amazing in. I think Amazing's a good jungler. But then I was like, hang on. They have Bang. They have Someday. How are they getting Amazing? He's an EU player, right? And so I looked it up. And so, okay, if you guys remember, back in 2014, Riot changed residency rules. So prior to that, there weren't any residency rules really. Players just kind of got to declare their residency. And so in 2014, they started putting on the requirements of like minimum play time in a certain region before you actually became eligible for residency in that particular region. But when they made those changes, they gave exemptions to players who were playing on teams in, I think specifically the LCS teams, who were playing in that region, right? So anybody who would not have been a resident with their new rules that they came out with, was exempt from actually having to meet that requirement, and was then considered an exempt non-resident, right? Okay. So, if you'll remember also back in 2014, Amazing played for a team by the name of Team Solo Mid in North America. So Amazing is actually an exempt non-resident of North America. So he does not count as an import slot for 100 Thieves. So I would argue that 100 Thieves technically has 3 imports now, with Amazing being in jungle, Someday being in top lane, Bang being in the bot lane. So they pulled a sneaky one on you there, I think. That was some pretty smart maneuvering by 100 Thieves. And I think it's a good move overall. I think that Amazing will be a good jungler for him. I think that last split, the lack of having a playmaker, a strong mid of the map, right, in the jungler and the mid lane duo, it took away a lot of the power that they had in those side lanes. And sure, Afromu didn't have the best split either. Bang was pretty like a non-factor. Someday tried his hardest to carry that team in multiple occasions, and they were too heavy, man. But with that said, I think that last split was rough. They didn't have power in the center of the map. Hopefully this will give them a little bit more agency in the middle of the map. Hopefully Soligo turns out to be okay. If not, you need to pick up Demonte. But if he's okay, then maybe they're able to, get something going and actually put together a good split here. I think that I think they will likely make playoffs. I think there's a better chance they make playoffs than they don't. But again, for the purpose of this particular video, I'm going to give them number 5. Alright guys, so number 6. This is a team that I expected to do pretty well last split. They did okay. And, they're like a middle of the road team for me. Number 6 is going to be Golden Guardians. So they're bringing in the same roster as last split, which is good. I think they met expectations, and, give the team another split, see if they continue to grow as a team, and maybe they perform a little bit better, and you can kind of assess from that point. So I think it's a pretty good move to keep the same roster in that. And they're a decent team. They're not awful. They're not great. Sometimes Froggen can carry and make them look better than they are. Sometimes Hanser's able to put on a pretty good performance as well. And sometimes even Contracts can make a couple of decent plays. Where I have a problem with this team is their bot lane. Their bot lane is pretty terrible in my opinion. Definitely is a very meh AD carry. And I don't see him. I don't know if I see him beating any AD carry in a 1v1, honestly. And he just, unless I think he's had a couple of decent Draven games, but you can't just play Draven every game in the LCS. It just won't work that way. And then Ole's I hate to use the term washed up, right? Because he would destroy me in any game, but he's just meh, right? He had a pretty good run, and then just had a terrible year last year and didn't recover in spring split. I'll worry if he'll be able to recover at all. So the bot lane's not super good. They have to carry from middle or top with the help of jungler, and they'll beat the teams below them. A lot of the teams that I haven't mentioned here are even worse. So for that reason, I think they'll be right on that verge of making playoffs, and I think they'll just squeeze in there. So I'm going to put them at number 6. And so now we get to the teams that I think will not make playoffs. It was tough to kind of distinguish between after number 3 as to what teams actually will, because I feel like there's a pretty hard drop after that in terms of the ability for these teams to actually do well. But in this one, number 7, I'm going to put CLG. And the reason I even put them as high as they did, if you haven't heard already, they've cut Darshan. Darshan is no longer with CLG. They have picked up Ruin, who was the top laner for 1907 Fibonacci. I don't know how to say their name, but it's like a Turkish team. They played at MSI. They almost beat Fangvu Buffalo out of their group to actually go on to face Team Liquid, but the Buffalo beat them, and they were knocked out, I think, immediately after Ruin left the team and was picked up by CLG. I like Darshan as a person. I mean, from what I can tell, right, I've never met him, but like his personality, he seems like a pretty good guy, down to earth. He's into the game. He's passionate about it, but he was not performing. We can all kind of surely agree on that. I don't think it's like a hot take to say Darshan wasn't doing well. And I don't really know how I feel about Ruin. He did, to be fair, he was shining in the group stage of MSI against teams like Fangvu Buffalo and the other 2 teams that were in their group that I can't think of right now. Didn't research that beforehand. Probably should have. But yeah, he was doing okay. Had they made it out of groups and we got to see more, maybe I have a better idea. I don't watch the Turkish league, and I think he used to be in EU, but I don't really remember him in EU. So maybe it was that forgettable. I don't know. But he was playing, carry style top laner, which Darshan was kind of trying to mimic and had that Jax game, but that was about it. But apart from Ruin, everybody else is relatively mediocre. I don't think that changes enough to actually, change how they finish in the split. I think they'll, probably again still beat the teams that are below them in the standings, but struggle to get wins from the top teams and end up right on that cusp of playoffs, but not quite make it in. But yeah, Power of Evil's pretty good. I think Stixay is pretty good, and I mean Biofrost is, I think, a really good support, probably top 4 supports in North America. But their jungler, man, I don't like Wiggly. I think he's not an LCS caliber player. I think he still belongs in Academy, and without a better jungler, I don't think a better top laner, arguably a better top laner, is gonna turn this team around too much. So I think they'll be right there on the cusp of playoffs, but not quite make it in. So they're at number 7. All right, now as we get to these final 3 teams, it should be noted that all 3 of these guys are having inside or like organizational issues that I think are going to end up bleeding into their performance on stage, and I think that plays a huge part. Maybe I'm overestimating that. That's fair to say, but I think that it will negatively affect their performance and ultimately, lead to them not doing so well as split. But we'll start off with Echo Fox at number 8. So Echo Fox is not really that good of a team already, in my opinion. I think that their players are okay, right? You have mediocre players, but they have Rush, and so there's the Rush factor, right? Like at any given time, Rush could just go crazy and change the game up for you. Last split, I didn't see that from him, and so I don't know if that's actually going to be the case for this one as well. But it's just something to note, right? That the teams are or the players on the team are just meh, and you have Rush who could potentially make it better. The inside issues with Echo Fox, if you haven't heard, Rick Fox was talking about actually leaving Echo Fox due to some racist comments that were thrown apparently by one of the shareholders of Echo Fox. This isn't so much a team-oriented thing, but Rick Fox does attend a lot of the games, and I do think that could negatively affect. If the owner, I'm sure that there are other people that have ownership in the team, but the face of the organization is having issues with the organization. I could see that negatively impacting the players as well. But on top of the fact that it's a mediocre team with a hit or miss jungler, I'm going to put them at number 8 for this one. All right, so the next team on the list, which is not the last place team, according to me, is going to be number 9, Optic Gaming. So Optic Gaming, in my opinion, is just a pretty poor team. I mean, I like Crown. I think Crown had a really good first split. I've already mentioned that I like Meteos. Dardoch's a pretty good player, although I don't like his attitude. I think that combo, a good mid-jungle combo, is good for a League of Legends team. And I think that it shows that the fact that they were almost able to make playoffs in the spring split is specifically due to that factor. Because Dokla is a straight dumpster fire. Jokla. I didn't even mean to make the joke. It wrote itself. Like, Dokla is so bad. I could outperform Dokla. Okay, that's a stretch. Okay, maybe slight stretch. But he's really bad. He's not a good player. And then on top of that, Arrow, somebody that has had even decent splits in North America before. For the past couple of splits, he's just been bad. Big. I don't like the way that his voice sounds. I feel like he should have a deeper voice. But also, he's not a very good player. And because of these reasons, on top of the fact that they're one of the teams that is mentioning the fact that they're possibly wanting to sell their spot in the LCS already, I don't have a lot of faith in the team or the organization as a whole. I think that they'll miss playoffs by at least a couple of games, if not a little bit larger of a margin. All right, and then the last place team, if you are good at process of elimination, you can already determine that I think the last place team will be the retired Korean team. I mean, Clutch Gaming. So Clutch Gaming, who is not a team of retired Koreans, is actually they're meh. I mean, when I saw the lineup at the beginning of Spring Split, I was like, oh, this is going to be a pretty good team, right? Because you got Huni in the top lane. Huni's a beast, and he did not play like that at all in Spring. And so it really makes you worry about whether he cares or if he's just there to collect a paycheck. I don't really know. I do know that he underperformed everybody's expectations in Spring Split. Lyra hasn't been good for a couple of splits now, or a couple of years actually now, maybe since he was on, what was that, Envy? I mean, it's been a while since Lyra's been pretty good, and I don't expect that to change going into summer. And then you got Piglet, right? And so Piglet, for most of spring, was playing AD carry, and then was it the last game of the last week, or maybe the last week entirely, something like that. They took Demonte out, probably one of the better performing members on their team. Took him out, put Piglet in the mid lane, and then had Cody Sun come in from Academy to play AD carry. They have some other problems apart. They're the other team that's already talking about selling their spot in the LCS. And so a team with those organizational issues, on top of the fact that they had what on paper should be a good lineup and underperformed pretty heavily in Spring Split, it leaves very little faith that they'll be able to turn this around. I mean, the players had, these players used to be really good. If they can somehow find that again, the combo of Huni and Lyra and Piglet, that can be a deadly combination, and they could be a really good team. But because of that, you got 3 Koreans with 2 presumably non-Korean speakers, in Demonte and Vulcan. That's assuming that they don't just keep the lineup that they had at the end of the Spring Split last year, where Demonte's not playing at all, in which case he should definitely go to 100 Thieves. Why is he still on Clutch Gaming? Okay, I need to get off that. But still, this team could be decent, but they've just underperformed. Their organization doesn't look like it's on solid ground. Demonte's okay, Vulcan's okay, But if the three Korean players aren't communicating well with Demonte and Vulcan, and there's just a mismatch of communication in game, it's going to be hard for them to do really well. So for that purpose and the organizational issues, I'm going to put them at 10th place in my power rankings. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope you liked my power rankings episode. If you did, give me that thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already, definitely make sure to leave your comments below as to where you think I'm wrong on this list, or if you think I'm right on this list. Let me know below. Let me know what you think. I want to know what everybody's thinking about these roster changes, about what could possibly happen in the summer split, and what we can come to expect come June 1st when it starts up. But yeah, again, hopefully you liked the video, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.